The comic book sensation Stealing Solo is back with a brand new edition, the entire fandom menace painted like you've never seen us before, featuring a cover from Anna That Star Wars Girl. Back the comic, get the trading cards, wear the t-shirt, spread the word. Stealing Solo is back, and it's the Fandom Menace edition, available only until May 2nd on Indiegogo.
The following is a world-class Bullshitters exclusive.
We're on the road to WrestleMania. There's just a few days until the granddaddy of them all, and the WWE is taking their show of shows to a whole new platform. Peacock, NBC's new streaming platform. Since the late 1980s, the WWE, then known as the WWF, has had a strong working relationship with NBC. Together, they brought wrestling fans Saturday Night's Main Event, the Main Event, original title, and even WrestleMania 2 by proxy. According to history, then SNL executive producer Dick Ebersol made a deal with the WWF owner Vince McMahon to produce the show Saturday Night's Main Event after Ebersol had seen the high ratings the two WWF specials drew on MTV. Saturday Night's Main Event was a tremendous ratings success for NBC during its heyday, most notably on the March 14th, 1987 show, which drew an 11.6 rating, which to this day remains the highest rating any show has ever done in that time slot. That show was headlined by a battle royale involving Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant, who were slated to face each other at WrestleMania 3. WWE's relationship with NBC goes back decades, so it wasn't much of a surprise when it was announced that they had partnered with NBC. In January of 2021, it was announced that the WWE would be merging the WWE Network, aka the wrestling version of Netflix, with NBC's terribly named Peacock streaming service. This is what they had to say. NBC Universal has had a long-standing relationship with the WWE that began nearly 30 years ago with Monday Night Raw on USA. Excuse me, PR team, it goes back a little further. Just saying. WWE has always tapped into the cultural zeitgeist with spectacular live events and larger-than-life characters, and we are thrilled to be the exclusive home for the WWE Network and its millions, they don't deserve that, of fans across the country, said Rick Cordella, Executive Vice President and Chief Revenue Officer for Peacock. WWE Network is a transformative addition to the platform and complements Peacock's massive catalog of iconic movies and shows, as well as the best live news and sports from NBC Universal and beyond. We are thrilled to further the long-standing and trusted partnership with WWE and NBC Universal, said Nick Khan, WWE President and Chief Revenue Officer. Peacock is an innovative platform that will enable us to showcase our most significant events, including WrestleMania, and provide the extraordinary entertainment fans have come to expect with the combination of premium WWE content, live sports, news, film, and television programs. Awesome. A newer, better platform for the WWE. Except it's fucking not. I'd never ask anyone that's not a wrestling fan to give a shit about current WWE product. Hell, I can barely stand it myself these days. And I've been a fan since 1999. In the 22 years of my fandom, I've watched the WWF turn into the WWE and then shit the bed more and more every year, until we reached this point right here with a fucked up WrestleMania and a censorship policy that would make the Chinese blush. That's the crux of today's video. This isn't a video about why you should like the WWE or wrestling in general. It's a video about how terrible... Seriously? Are we streaming on Peacock too? This video is about how stupid censorship is. Censorship is wrong in any manner. It's the people not involved in making art altering it to their liking. It seems that not a week goes by that we can't avoid the topic. If companies are not putting up pointless disclaimers to protect themselves from weak-minded fools on social media, they're removing questionable content altogether. It's a lot like the banned films list, which is a list of approximately 30 films that were at one time considered to be so shocking that they had to be cut. You'll notice the decisions were overturned, quickly in some regards. The most recent film on the list, The Yes Men Fix the World, was banned in the United States because... a lawsuit from the United States Chamber of Commerce. Yeah, it was that serious. In the United States, we take censorship to the nth degree because content providers are lazy. Actually, it's the parents' fault. Parents want to look like they're on the job 24/7, just like R-Truth. They even want a title too. But in reality, the reason the content here is so generic is so parents can dump their kids in front of a screen and keep them distracted for hours. They won't take the time to screen the content the kids watch, so they want everything sanitized. Boobs, butts, bush, and blood must be sacrificed to appease the puritanical gods who control our entertainment. They want to put out easily digestible entertainment that doesn't question anyone. It doesn't question anything. They want safe, non-offensive content, so your kids can watch while you fuck off yourself. It's safe fun for the whole family. So if you've been watching this long, you know that the WWE is moving its streaming network over to Peacock, and that censorship is bad. So what's the deal? Why are we talking about this here on World Class Bullshitters? Where do these topics intersect? Right here, right now. That's for you Botchamania fans. WWE content continues to be censored ahead of move to Peacock. WWE's forthcoming move to Peacock has not been without its share of controversy as NBC Universal Streaming Services prepares to officially launch the WWE Network. As part of a billion-dollar deal, Peacock will have exclusive rights to the WWE Network in the United States, acting as a gatekeeper for WWE's content is NBC's Standards and Practices, which is currently reviewing the entire WWE Network library for potentially problematic content. This dynamic puts a great deal of WWE content in danger of being left off Peacock and even shelved altogether by WWE for good. Like with other shows on the Peacock platform, we are reviewing WWE content to ensure that it aligns with Peacock's standards and practices, said NBC Universal in a recent New York Times article. The ongoing audit of WWE Network content will require 17,000 hours of review. Peacock continues to hire for WWE Network jobs with such a staggering watch time ahead to contend with. The upstart streaming service has already begun to omit controversial vintage WWE footage. Rowdy Roddy Piper painting half his body in blackface ahead of his WrestleMania 6 feud against Bad News Brown, and Vince McMahon casually saying the N-word to John Cena are just two moments which did not make it to Peacock. WWE has opted to edit controversial content from all platforms, not just Peacock. Both WWE's golden age, in the rock and wrestling era of the 80s, and the attitude era of the 90s, took place during times rife for controversial content. Whether it was for the tone deafness of the 80s or the shock value of the 90s, a wide array of classic WWE content may be seeing its final days on WWE program, especially out of context. Several wrestlers have commented on the soon-to-be censored WWE Network, and what segments, promos, and matches have been rendered endangered streaming. Brian Pillman Jr. says, "Pretty sure none of my dad's WWF promos are going to make it to Peacock." Stevie Richards says, "So, Peacock TV is censoring and removing WWE content?" More on him later. Lance Storm says, "I just checked. The Peacock edits are on the regular WWE Network too. WrestleMania 6 skips from Beefcake to Hart Foundation match. If you select Piper Bad News Brown match, it goes right to the Hart Foundation. I hope everyone kept their box sets of DVDs and VHS tapes." Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. How do these people keep forgetting that? Running from the past isn't good if you're the WWE because your entire business exists to cash in on the past. Much like Star Wars, the WWE cannot stop living in the past. Just like Star Wars fans have shunned stupid characters like Rey, Finn, Poe, Rose, and Holdo, WWE fans don't give a shit about Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, Charlotte Flair, etc. Sure, they have fans, but so does The Last Jedi. What I'm saying is people aren't buying in strictly for the new wrestlers. They stick around for the old. If the WWE were to stop making anything based on their questionable past content, they wouldn't be making as much money, period. Watch a single WWE show and you'll see ads for t-shirts. Cool, everybody sells t-shirts, right? We do too. But if you pay close attention, they advertise shirts for wrestlers who haven't stepped into a ring in nearly 20 years. Stone Cold Steve Austin wrestled his last match against The Rock in 2003 at WrestleMania 19, yet I see his shirt still prominently featured on WWE programming. In those same commercials, I see classic title belts being advertised, some featuring designs from over 30 years ago. Go to any store that sells WWE action figures and you're guaranteed to find a classic superstar or a figure from a wave that features a legend. Classic wrestling is vital to modern wrestling. On the video game front, there are games celebrating wrestlers from as far back as 45 years ago. Just check out Legends of WrestleMania. Or don't, because the game sucked. Why would you make an incredible game like that and give it shit controls? I mean, goddammit, it was 2009, and I'm still pissed. For a better example, see WWE 2K14, featuring a roster heavily sold on the past. Actually, every game is measured by its Legends content. Simply put, there's more money coming from the Legends of the past than most modern marks will give you credit for. Well, Roman Reigns carries the company during a really tough period. Shut your mouth, jabroni. The Rock carried the WWF when Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Undertaker were out with injuries, and Chris Jericho beat both The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin in a single night to become the undisputed champion. It was glorious. Wait a second, this is a wrestling video. I can do this. Glorious! These are fun. I should do more. Nah. I know I gave a pretty solid reference to the WWE's reliance on its past to make money, but that was just in the merchandising front, which is where the WWE makes most of its money. The WWE does more than just merchandise classic wrestler. They do shows called Legends Night where they bring back the guys from the past and celebrate them. Traditionally, it has been very successful. Pretty damn good too, especially when Jake the Snake Roberts came back to fight the Shield. Oh man. I'm trying to get away from those trips down memory lane to get to my point. The WWE sees so much value, i.e. money, in their past, that from 2011 to 2013, they banked their entire WrestleMania season on a man who hadn't wrestled a full year since the year 2000. The Rock. Yes, before he was acting in everything, The Rock was, still is, the greatest wrestler of all time. In 2011, he returned after a 7-year hiatus to announce that he was going to host WrestleMania. WWE Super Bowl that brings in a few $100 million over a weekend. No big deal. At the event, the WWE set up a storyline between The Rock and Nickelodeon icon John Cena that would play out over the next 2 years. When they faced each other at WrestleMania 28 in Miami, they did so in front of a massive audience. According to What Culture, it's fitting that the greatest WrestleMania buy rate of all time belongs to The Rock and John Cena. WrestleMania 28 had a year-long build-up with the greatest star of his generation against the greatest star of all time. It was a promotional masterclass, with the event feeling like an absolute must-see and getting over with a mainstream audience. There was a greater sense of occasion to it, with the once-in-a-lifetime tag making it feel like it had to be seen. So all that money, all that exposure, all those buys came from the past. Lapsed fans from decades past came back to see that match. It was like when The Force Awakens came out, except we all went home happy. It's not only disingenuous, but flat out wrong to say that the WWE doesn't cash in on their past achievements. A lot, almost too much. So when I see Eugene-level articles like this from Bleeding Cool, trying so hard to be cool and edgy and trying to pass off censorship as okay, I get pissed to the point where I'm hoping Rikishi offers these people a ride. Good God Almighty! Was that too harsh? Were your feelings hurt? Wrestling makes a lot of money from its past, so don't tell me that they're all of a sudden embarrassed by it. For years, when WWF was mainstream and cool, they were always up against adversity from the puritanical parent groups of the late 90s and early 2000s. It got so bad once that they had to recall this action figure because they claimed it promoted violence towards women. It was Al Snow, and he carried a mannequin head named Head, and it talked to him. Al Snow was many things, but he was more dangerous to himself than women. Just ask Mick Foley. So with all 17,000 hours of content being manually reviewed by Steven Richards himself, you gotta think there's some heinous moments that they're trying to cover up. Well, the darkest stuff that the WWE should be embarrassed by is already out there and very well documented. Vice has an excellent documentary series titled Dark Side of the Ring that covers some of the darkest moments in wrestling history, such as the final days of Owen Hart, the assassination of Dino Bravo, and probably the most famous wrestling controversy, the death of Chris Benoit. When the WWE launched its network in 2014, Chris Benoit's matches were included. You couldn't search his name because it appeared nowhere on the network. For example, if you wanted to watch one of the greatest triple threat matches of all time, the main event of WrestleMania 20, you'd see something like Shawn Michaels and Triple H face off in a triple threat match for the World Heavyweight Championship. An average person might figure out that a triple threat means 3 wrestlers and wonder who the third is. But the fans will know, and that's the best way to deal with that shit. Leave it there, just don't glorify him. What NBC Universal is doing with Peacock is pointless. They're cutting out moments that may be offensive by 1984 standards, and then expecting us to be happy about it. The stuff they're cutting out is sacred. It all is. No matter how offensive the content, we the fans want it. There's a classic skit where D-Generation X calls out the Nation of Domination, all while wearing blackface. And it's a classic. Yes, I said it. It was a parody, and while you'd get canceled for even thinking about it, 1998 was a different time. Hell, Jimmy Kimmel, the moral center of Hollywood, has put on blackface more recently. Not a good look, Jim. Did you personally apologize to Oprah? Dave Chappelle told me he hadn't called her yet. You should. Trying to police the past with the standards of today is not only unfair, but unobtainable, because they live in the hearts and minds of fans, and we love that shit. I may not be able to watch the DX Nation skit on Peacock, but I can call up my buddy Dion and scream, "Brother was bacon! Brother was bacon!" And he's gonna know exactly what I'm talking about. All good wrestling fans know that Booker T is coming for Hulk Hogan. Brother? The most fucked up part of all of this is that in an attempt to sanitize their appearance and seem racially conscious by 2021 standards, they're hurting the black guy they're trying to protect. One of the first segments we heard about being cut from existence, yes, it's that serious, was Bad News Brown versus Rowdy Roddy Piper, in which Rowdy Roddy Piper painted himself half black to face off against the actually black Bad News Brown. Yeah, it happened, and it's fucking stupid as it looks. But it happens to be one of Bad News Brown's biggest moments in the WWF. He didn't lose the match, it was a double countout, so it's not like the evil white man painted himself and beat up the black guy. No. Just like in real life, there were no winners. Also, the wrestler who painted himself, Rowdy Roddy Piper, was the victim of the greatest rib in history. Someone switched the paint he was using, and when he went to wash it off, it wouldn't come off. He was like that, or a lighter shade, for days. See comeuppance on a cosmic scale. These removed moments are time-sensitive. No, I don't want to see new blackface, etc., but the offensive content is a great learning tool. In the era these moments happened, they were mostly acceptable, and more times than not, the victims of the racial injustice won in the end. One of the guys being mocked in that brownface skit was The Rock. Yeah, that one. I don't think that hurt him either. While it may not be known to everyone, wrestling has always been pretty damn diverse, intentional or not. Yeah, you have archaic stereotypes like 40 years ago, i.e. the evil foreigner, but wrestling has had countless black, multiracial, and international champions that go back decades. A black world champion isn't news, There's currently one right now, and the first one, as recognized by WWE, Ron Simmons, was crowned in 1992. You've had dozens of Mexican and Japanese wrestlers reach the highest heights in mainstream pro wrestling. There have been countless international superstars, and even a few from parts unknown. Hell, there's even a family with one black brother and one white brother. Testify, if you know who I'm talking about. My point is, wrestling has had a diverse history that should be celebrated alongside the questionable by modern standards, but still pretty damn funny content being erased by Peacock. You can't enjoy the lows without the highs. You can't enjoy the good without the bad. And in the WWE, the good guys usually win. There are bigger problems in the world NBC Universal should be focusing on instead of worrying about erasing WWE history. By the way, who are they? Who are the few people making these moral decisions? I think that should be up to the fans. What I mean is, let the fans dictate what is remembered. Rowdy Roddy Piper is an icon, but his Bad News Brown moment isn't in my top 5, so I'm not going to seek it out. But when I watch WrestleMania 6, I expect everything to be there. It's part of wrestling history, but I don't celebrate it. There are countless other historical atrocities that we don't celebrate. Does it mean that we should conveniently stop printing those historical facts and forget to teach them to a generation? People died in the Hindenburg? Yes, people died in the Hindenburg. Sad, but that's the historical fact. Print it and move on. Erasing history is how you get a world where people think the earth is flat. See what I mean? As a wrestling fan, I hope the irony is not lost on you. The right to censor has finally won. Those white sock-wearing idiots actually played the long game and won. For those who don't know, the right to censor was a faction of wrestlers dedicated to morals and decency. In their former careers, they were pimps, porn stars, former corrections officers, and a hippie. They were committed to clean up WWF television by covering up all the boobs. They sucked, and we all cheered when they got beat up so bad they quit. 20 years later, they're all back and lamer than ever. Just called Peacock. Thankfully, I'm not the only one yelling into the void here. Screen Rant of all people had to chime in, and while they sound more reasonable than what's happening with Peacock, you know this is a big issue. Why Peacock's removal of controversial WWE content is a bad move. Peacock has removed 2 controversial segments from WWE's back catalog, sparking debate among fans about what the move means for the future WWE network. In early 2021, WWE sold its network streaming service to Peacock, and it appears that the latter intends to wipe from the archives any segment that may be offensive by today's standards. Yes, they were written and reviewed by a company and intentionally put on the air. That fact matters. And it is one that risks being erased by both companies if they continue down the path of removing the controversial footage. Peacock may have just ventured down a rabbit hole with WWE, and their findings may run far deeper than the above 2 segments. Peacock's removal of offensive content is particularly troubling because it shows just how much controversial content exists in WWE history. Put simply, there's a wealth of damning segments, matches, and wrestlers in WWE archives that are hard to stomach today. Longtime fans know that the promotion lags about a decade behind other forms of media when it comes to humanizing marginalized identities. No Screen Rant. WWE is kind of woke now. We gotta have the first women's pay-per-view and this and that. In many ways, they're kind of ahead of the trend, and I can't believe I'm trying to make an excuse because fuck them. Back on track. As far as race is concerned, WWE has historically given BIPOC wrestlers gimmicks consistent with stereotypes of their racial or ethnic backgrounds. Kamala, who passed away in 2020, was a black man whose gimmick saw him in African face paint gallivanting around the ring while grunting. Why don't you just call him his full name, Kamala the Ugandan Giant? He never spoke a coherent sentence, and his character was meant to be both feared and laughed at. Umaga, also deceased, had the gimmick of a barbaric Samoan monster. Despite belonging to the Anawai family, with the relationships of The Rock, Umaga was still reduced to a stereotype. I'm just going to stop for a second. I don't think this writer actually watched wrestling. I did. I was there when Umaga debuted his first match after WrestleMania 22. Like, I'm moving my arms like, what do you expect? Like, this guy's a fucking idiot. Who wrote this shit? Alyssa Capri. Good job, Alyssa. Good job. There was also the Yamaguchi-san, who was a maniacal yet comedic Asian wrestling figure whose best-known segment was one where he told an opponent he would choppy their pee-pee with a samurai sword. There were also the Mexicools, who were a stable of 3 Mexican wrestlers that mowed lawns and generally embraced stereotypical cholo culture, but perhaps the most overtly racist gimmick of the time was Muhammad Hassan, a Muslim terrorist active in the midst of the Iraqi war, played by a brown-faced wrestler who was an Italian-American. Yep, that all sucked. But the Mexicools aren't the only Mexican wrestlers ever in WWE. I hope Eddie Guerrero pops up later in this article. In terms of gender, I'm fucking done. What should the WWE do instead of removing content? Here we go. Rather than removing the content, Peacock could add content warnings, to the beginning of episodes, pay-per-views, and segments that contain offensive content. Other streaming services like Disney Plus have taken this method with various dated films in their catalog. This tactic would communicate with fans WWE's present-day awareness of how harmful older clips were while still keeping history intact. The WWE Network has been an amazing point of historical reference since its inception. History is made up of triumphs and transgressions. Removing historical artifacts because they make the public uncomfortable doesn't bring us closer to the understanding how the past affects us today. While this move by WWE and Peacock seems to be on the surface to protect the integrity of the companies, it actually accomplishes the opposite. Outside of the race baiting and some of the bias, I agree with that last statement. I don't even think a content warning is necessary. We, the fans, crave the old days. We want the beer, the boobs, the middle fingers, the questionable content, and more. I want the old network, the one we had a few days ago. Yes, days ago. But at the end of the day, that wouldn't matter because the censorship, as we know, is across all platforms. Yes, the WWE has bent the knee and started to give Peacock the old DX treatment. You don't need to be a wrestling fan to care about another case of wanton censorship. When they come for something you care about, and they will, be prepared because if we can't save the WWE Network, we're sure as hell going to avenge it by sailing the high seas on the same boat parked at Raymond James Stadium for WrestleMania. I can't publicly call for anything, but I'm not paying a dime to watch WrestleMania this year. I'll still watch it, but I ain't subscribing to Peacock. Fuck you, Vince. I got 2 words for you. So what do you guys think of this? Again, the WWE makes so much of its money from its back catalog, yet it doesn't respect it enough to keep it intact. I've been watching for 22 years, and I want to watch the shit I remember it. I hate living in a fucking world where I have to wonder, is this edited for TV? Is this censored? Is this changed? If I'm paying for content, it needs to be the original version. As that ridiculous Screen Rant article said, this was produced. At the time, it was considered awesome. But because society's become so fucking stupid, we're so worried about offending people. I'm offended. I'm not white. Do something about it. You see how this shit works? It's stupid. I'm offended. Let's change the world. Folks, buy your physical media. I know we say it all the time, but goddamn it, Lance Storm said it, and if I can be serious for just a minute, I think we should listen to him. You can go back and get the DVDs. They're a little different than the broadcast versions, which the network had for the most part. So the network was already the uncensored version. I mean, when it debuted in 2014, they said it's going to be uncensored and over the top. And I think the WWE Network is an example of giving away too much value when your product isn't worth that much. So let me explain this real quick before we go. What I mean is they gave you a $10 a month subscription service, and you got $60 a month pay-per-views included every month. So as a wrestling fan, it's stupid not to sign up. It was only $9.99 a month after all. They ran that into the fucking ground. And it was a great deal. But because modern wrestling sucked and people weren't signing up to watch the new pay-per-views, WWE Network had a struggle to get to 1 million subscribers. And then I don't ever think it passed that. Last year at this time, they were talking about them selling it, doing something with ESPN or Disney. And at the end of the day, it came to Peacock. So NBC Universal is about as dangerous as Disney. Because they're so worried about offending, they're so worried about this. Folks, I'm just going to say this to the world. Parents, don't let your kids watch shit without screening it. It's not the WWF from the year 2001's responsibility to make sure that little Timothy and little Alicia aren't offended by watching Triple H fight The Undertaker, or watching The Rock make Stone Cold bleed, or watch Trish Stratus bark like a dog. Like, the kids shouldn't be watching that shit. It wasn't even for kids back then. It was technically TV-14, and I was one of those edgy kids watching it because it was the cool thing to do. Well, fuck it was pretty cool. And now, I look back on those moments. Some have aged well, some have not. But overall, I'm still proud to be a wrestling fan. Well, I should say was. Because as the WWE practices its very Orwellian policies to wipe away its past, I have less and less desire to support them with my money, with my time, with my words. WWE is quickly becoming irrelevant to me, much like Star Wars has. And it's not because I've changed. You can document my takes on Star Wars here on the channel, and you can now document my takes on wrestling here. It's not that I'm asking for some unrealistic expectation. All I want is for shit to be there the way it was last week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks ago, for the entirety of the network. You didn't need to fix something. It wasn't broke. So instead of trying to constantly virtue signal and make the world a better place, Vince, make a better product. WrestleMania is in a few short days away, and I couldn't give 2 shits less. I don't care if it's coronavirus or any other excuse you have. You've had no excuse for the dog shit hype, build, and actual match card that you want to call your biggest show of the year. I took extra time to prepare this video because this is a topic I'm very passionate about, much like the Mulan Disney stuff. Yeah, I haven't watched Mulan. Yeah, I'm not going to support it, but I don't think they need to go to those provinces where they culturally genocide people. I'm just as passionate about that as I am the WWE Network. It's all about standards and principles. Don't worry about standards and practices. Worry about standards and principles. Keep your standards high. Always stick by your principles. and always be excellent to each other.